The unknown threat. The sky above Earth had always been calm, a vast blue expanse with no threats in sight. But that all changed one quiet evening when a strange signal was detected, one that didn't belong to any known language or source. It wasn't a simple radio signal or a piece of space debris. This was different. The signal was sharp, clear, and it carried a message. At the International Space Research Center, Dr. Emily Reed, a brilliant scientist who specialized in deep space communication, was the first to hear it. She sat at her desk, sifting through the usual noise of satellite data, when something caught her attention. A pattern. A sequence of numbers that didn't match any known codes. It wasn't a malfunction or an error. It was deliberate. Curious, Dr. Reed adjusted the controls, isolating the signal. She frowned as the message became clearer. It was a warning. A chilling one. The words appeared on the screen. The Black Armada will awaken. Humanity will stand or fall. The words echoed in her mind, sending a shiver down her spine. The Black Armada. What could that be? She quickly shared the signal with her team, but they were just as puzzled. No one had ever heard of anything called the Black Armada. She tried to trace the origin of the signal, but it seemed to be coming from nowhere, or rather, from somewhere they couldn't reach. Across the world, news of the mysterious signal spread quickly. Governments scrambled to understand what it meant. Some experts dismissed it as a hoax or a glitch. Others, like Dr. Reed, believed it was something much more serious. The timing couldn't have been a coincidence. Why now, after so many years of peace, would this message appear? As the days passed, the world's scientific community raced to decode more of the signal. But strange things began to happen. Satellites orbiting Earth started to malfunction. First, it was a few, then dozens. One by one, Earth's space infrastructure began to fall apart. Communications with astronauts were lost, and entire stations went dark without explanation. The more they investigated, the clearer it became. Something was happening out there, something dangerous. One afternoon, Dr. Reed's team received a new transmission. But this time, it wasn't just a signal. It was a visual message. On the screen, a giant dark shape appeared, unlike any ship or object they had ever seen before. It was massive, its shape jagged and angular, as though it had been carved from a block of pure black stone. The message accompanying the image sent another chill down their spines. We are the Black Armada. Your world is next. The Earth's leadership was thrown into chaos. World leaders gathered for an emergency meeting, but no one could offer an explanation. Who were these beings? Where did they come from? And what did they want with Earth? The scientists weren't much better off. Dr. Reed and her team worked tirelessly to analyze the data, but everything pointed to one terrifying fact. The Black Armada wasn't just a fleet of alien ships. It was a weapon, an ancient and deadly force. If the message was true, humanity was facing a threat like nothing they had ever seen. The ships appeared to be capable of wiping out entire planets with their technology. But why Earth? Why now? Dr. Reed leaned over her workstation, staring at the strange image of the Black Armada ship. Her mind raced with questions. The energy readings coming from the ship were unlike anything they had studied before. It seemed to draw power from a source deep within space, something that wasn't supposed to exist. And there was one more thing that terrified her. The ship was moving. It was slowly, but unmistakably, moving toward Earth. As the days passed, the world grew more and more anxious. The skies remained calm, but every observatory, every telescope, was trained on the heavens, looking for any sign of the Black Armada's arrival. In every country, military forces began preparing for something they couldn't fully understand. Panic spread as rumors swirled. Was this an alien invasion, or something worse? The Black Armada didn't just threaten Earth. It had the power to destroy everything. Its ships were designed to tear through defenses, crushing anything in their path. And if the warning was true, it was only a matter of time before the full fleet arrived. The fear was palpable. The world watched in uncertainty, waiting for the inevitable. What if the signal was a prelude to the end? Dr. Reed spent sleepless nights studying the transmissions, looking for any clues that could help. But as she worked, she began to notice something odd, something that only she seemed to recognize. The frequency of the signal wasn't just random. It was structured, almost like a code. Her instincts told her that it was a map, one that would lead them to the heart of the Black Armada's origin. She just had to decode it. But as she delved deeper into the pattern, another realization hit her. The Black Armada wasn't merely a threat. It was a force that had been preparing for this moment for centuries, waiting for humanity to reach a certain level of development before making its move. And now it was coming. The final message came in the dead of night, sent directly to Dr. Reed's personal terminal. It was short, but its meaning was unmistakable. The time is now. Your fight begins. With the full force of the Black Armada bearing down on Earth, humanity had little time to prepare. The first confrontation was coming, and they had no idea how to stop it. The world had no choice but to unite. But even if they could find a way to defend themselves, was it too late? The Black Armada had awakened, and it wasn't backing down. The first encounter. As the days passed, the world continued to wait in tense silence. Nations were on edge, preparing for the unknown. Military forces began to mobilize, and the most powerful space agencies in the world worked overtime, trying to make sense of the growing threat. The mysterious Black Armada, an alien force unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, was moving closer to Earth, its intentions still unclear. Dr. Emily Reed and her team were no closer to understanding who or what the Black Armada was. Their scans of the alien fleet yielded no answers. It was as though the ships were built from materials that defied all known laws of physics. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't find any weaknesses, any chinks in the armor. The ships were as invulnerable as they were massive. Humanity had never faced anything like this before. One afternoon, the world's worst fears were realized. A massive blackout struck the globe, plunging every city into darkness for several minutes. Panic spread as people scrambled for answers. The blackout wasn't just a power failure, it was a signal. And it came from the Black Armada. Every light, every power grid, every satellite link on Earth was cut off in an instant. It didn't take long for the truth to dawn on the world's leaders. The Black Armada had arrived. In space, the fleet began to reveal itself. The ships appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, emerging from the vast reaches of space, their dark forms casting an ominous shadow over the Earth. They were enormous, their jagged black exteriors giving off an eerie glow as they hovered just outside Earth's atmosphere. From the ground, people could see them, towering ships that seemed to stretch across the sky, blocking out the sun. The sight was enough to freeze the world in place. No one knew what to do. As the fleet hovered in place, Dr. Reed and her team worked furiously to make contact with the ships. The transmission they received was clear but chilling. The Black Armada's leader, a voice deep and otherworldly, echoed through their systems. Humanity, you are now at the center of a decision that will shape your future. Will you submit or will you fight? The voice was like a thunderclap in the silence of space, reverberating through the very atmosphere. It sent a shockwave of fear throughout the world. There was no question now. The Black Armada wasn't here to negotiate. They had come to Earth with one purpose: to either conquer or destroy. The world's governments scrambled to respond. But what could they do? There was no military force capable of standing up to the sheer power of the Black Armada. Fighter jets and space defense systems stood no chance against the enormous alien ships. Every attempt to approach or confront the fleet had failed. Earth's greatest minds had no answers. They had no idea how to fight back. But Dr. Reed refused to give up. She gathered a small team of experts and engineers to analyze the enemy fleet. If they couldn't find a way to fight back, perhaps they could at least understand the Black Armada's technology. After all, their entire existence was based on principles far beyond Earth's current understanding. If they could reverse engineer even a fraction of that technology, they might have a chance. With the entire world watching, Dr. Reed and her team launched a mission to get closer to the fleet. Their objective was to gather data on the enemy ships, to learn whatever they could before the battle began. The team worked quickly, sending drones and scanners up to the fleet, hoping to get a glimpse of their inner workings. The data they received was fragmented and incomplete, but it was enough to confirm one thing. The Black Armada's ships were far beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. The first contact with the Black Armada wasn't a battle. It was an invasion, a silent declaration of dominance. No shots were fired, no explosions shattered the quiet. The alien fleet simply loomed, casting its dark shadow over Earth, watching as humanity scrambled to figure out what to do. Then suddenly, the silence was broken. A beam of light shot out from one of the Black Armada's ships, striking a remote part of Earth's surface. The blast was so powerful it could be seen from space. It wasn't a warning. It was a demonstration of their power. The message was clear. The Black Armada was in control, and humanity had no choice but to listen. In the wake of the attack, world leaders met again, this time in desperation. Every option seemed to be on the table. The Black Armada had made its move, and Earth had little time left to react. What would humanity do now? Would they give in to the alien invaders, or would they try to fight back, knowing they were vastly outmatched? The countdown had begun. The world was waiting, each person wondering how much time they had before the next attack came. In the shadows, Dr. Reed continued to work, desperate to find any advantage they could. But with every passing moment, the reality of their situation grew more and more apparent. Humanity was facing an enemy with unimaginable power, and the first battle was just the beginning. The enemy strikes. The world had barely had time to react to the Black Armada's initial display of power. The air was thick with tension, and every corner of Earth was on edge. The aliens had demonstrated their might with a single devastating blast, one that shattered a remote region of Earth's surface, creating a crater that seemed to swallow the very land beneath it. The world's nations had never faced anything like this. Humanity, united in fear, was now at the mercy of an alien force that had proven itself far superior in strength and technology. Dr. Emily Reed sat in the command center, staring at the data streaming across her screen. She had never seen anything like it. The scans from the Black Armada's fleet revealed impossible energy signatures, strange, almost organic structures built into their ships. Their technology was beyond comprehension, and it only fueled her growing sense of dread. Yet there was still a part of her that refused to give up. She knew that understanding the enemy was the key to survival. She couldn't afford to let fear dictate her actions. The meeting room was filled with world leaders, military commanders, and scientists. All of them were desperately trying to formulate a plan. But the truth was clear. Nothing they had would be enough. The Black Armada's technology was too advanced, and their firepower too overwhelming. Earth had no way of competing. One of the generals stood up, his face grim. "We've received reports from every major defense system," he said. "Our military is ready, but the Black Armada hasn't responded to any of our attempts at communication. We've even sent fighter jets toward them, but they didn't stand a chance. The ships are untouchable." Dr. Reed nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. There was no traditional fight to be had here. The Black Armada wasn't here for negotiations or diplomacy. They had come to conquer, and the only question was when they would strike next, and how. That very evening, as the world anxiously awaited any sign of the next move, the answer came. A series of black clouds appeared in the sky. Not natural storms, but dense, swirling masses that spread rapidly across continents. They covered vast areas, blocking out the sun and casting the earth in an eerie twilight. Cities, once bathed in daylight, were now left in darkness. The clouds were not just a sign of something coming. They were part of the invasion. Dr. Reed and her team watched in horror as the clouds began to pulse with strange energy. Through the darkness, The Black Armada's ships moved with perfect precision, positioning themselves in a vast, impenetrable formation above Earth. It was then that the world saw what the aliens had planned. From the ships, beams of concentrated energy began to fire down, hitting cities across the globe. The beams didn't explode upon impact. Instead, they seemed to disintegrate everything they touched, leaving behind only an eerie, glowing residue. The devastation was immediate. Major cities around the world were struck within moments. New York, London, Tokyo, all fell under the assault of the Black Armada. Buildings collapsed into nothingness as the energy beams rained down from above. Entire military bases, once thought to be impenetrable, were reduced to rubble. The world's defense systems were helpless against the onslaught. People scrambled to evacuate, but it was too late. The power of the Black Armada was overwhelming. Governments had tried to prepare, but in the face of such destruction, there was no hope of victory. The world's greatest weapons couldn't touch the alien ships. Humanity was outmatched, outclassed, and out of options. In the chaos, Dr. Reed was forced to make a choice. She knew that the Black Armada would not stop until Earth was theirs. Every second counted. Her team had gathered enough data to confirm one unsettling truth. These ships weren't just alien. They were designed for annihilation. Their purpose was clear: to wipe out civilizations, to destroy entire worlds, and to rebuild them in their image. Earth was just the next target. Desperate to find a way to fight back, Dr. Reed pushed her team harder. They scored through every piece of data, every fragment of knowledge they had gathered. There had to be something, some weakness in the Black Armada's design they could exploit. The clock was ticking, and the fate of humanity depended on them finding an answer. Meanwhile, the world outside was descending into chaos. Global communications had broken down, and there was no central command to give orders. People were left to fend for themselves, and as cities burned and crumbled, the feeling of helplessness spread like wildfire. The Black Armada didn't care about borders, didn't care about governments. It was a force of destruction, and it was relentless. At that moment, a new transmission arrived, one that wasn't just from the Black Armada. It was from the mysterious leader of the fleet. The voice was cold, emotionless, yet full of authority. "Humanity's resistance is futile," it said. "You will be eradicated and your planet will be consumed. But before that, you will understand your place in the galaxy. We are the Black Armada, and this is your reckoning." The transmission ended with a chilling silence. And then, the skies darkened even further. Another wave of destruction began. Dr. Reed's heart raced. The time for talking was over. The time for action had come. Humanity had two choices: to accept their fate or to fight, even if they had no idea how. There was no guarantee of survival, but one thing was certain: if humanity was to go down, they would do it fighting. A flicker of hope. The aftermath of the Black Armada's devastating attack was nothing short of catastrophic. The once thriving cities of Earth now lay in ruins, reduced to smoldering ashes by the relentless beams that had rained down from the alien ships. Humanity's defenses had crumbled in the face of overwhelming power. Governments had collapsed, and chaos reigned across the globe. But amid the destruction, there was a flicker of hope. If only humanity could find a way to fight back. Dr. Emily Reed had barely slept in days, her mind racing with calculations, theories, and what-ifs. Her team worked tirelessly to analyze the data they had gathered from the Black Armada ships. The enemy was far stronger, far more advanced, but there had to be something they could use against them. A single weakness, a small gap in the armor. They had been scouring the remains of the world's most powerful defense systems, scraps of satellite data, pieces of shattered military equipment, and the few working communications channels that remained. Through it all, one question kept repeating in Dr. Reed's mind: is there anything at all, that we can use to stop them? The answer, surprisingly, came from the unlikeliest of places. While the Black Armada's ships had been designed for destruction, one thing stood out in the data. They were not invulnerable. Their ships had immense power, yes, but they were also reliant on a complex system of energy conduits to sustain that power. And like any system of energy, it had its limitations. Dr. Reed and her team had uncovered an unusual energy fluctuation in the Black Armada's technology, something that could be exploited. It was a small vulnerability, but it was there. The problem was that the Black Armada's ships were too far above Earth's surface for any missile or satellite to reach. The alien fleet remained beyond humanity's reach, and no military force could get close enough to exploit the weakness. As Dr. Reed examined the data further, a sudden realization hit her. The key to defeating the Black Armada didn't lie in traditional warfare. It lay in their own technology. The aliens had relied on an advanced form of cloaking technology, hiding the true extent of their fleet. If they could reverse engineer it, they might be able to send something into the heart of the fleet, something undetected. But there was one problem. The aliens had the power to track and destroy anything that entered their airspace, and no one on Earth had the capability to build something fast enough or powerful enough to survive such an encounter. It was then that Dr. Reed recalled a piece of research from earlier in her career. Years ago, she had worked on a project that involved harnessing the power of the seventh dimension, a theoretical, hidden plane of existence that might offer new ways to travel through space. At the time, it had seemed like science fiction. But now, with the stakes higher than ever, it was the one thing that might save them. The seventh dimension wasn't just a theoretical concept. It was real, and Dr. Reed had spent years studying it. She knew it held the key to bending the laws of physics, creating a kind of super-fast movement that could allow something to travel undetected by the Black Armada sensors. If they could tap into this power, they might be able to send a vessel directly into the heart of the enemy fleet, strike at its core, and give humanity a fighting chance. With the world's remaining resources stretched thin and their time running out, Dr. Reed and her team began the race to build the first human vessel capable of entering the seventh dimension. They used every scrap of technology, every scientific breakthrough, and every ounce of knowledge they had acquired over the years. It was a gamble, a long shot, to say the least, but it was the only hope they had left. The global resistance, once scattered and disorganized, began to come together. There were whispers of the project, a ship that could travel between dimensions, carrying humanity's hopes in its wake. Engineers, scientists, and military personnel worked day and night to build the vessel. Supplies were scarce, and many had given up hope, but some still believed that they could defeat the Black Armada if they could just get one shot, one strike at the heart of the enemy. For the first time in weeks, the world seemed to breathe. The flicker of hope grew brighter as Dr. Reed's plan began to take shape, but it wasn't without its risks. The ship that would be sent to infiltrate the Black Armada's fleet would have to navigate through hostile territory, bypassing the most advanced alien defenses ever created. It would need to be built to withstand an environment completely unlike anything humanity had encountered before. As the countdown began, the world waited in silence. People who had once doubted humanity's ability to stand up to the aliens now rallied behind the project. There was a sense of unity in the air, an understanding that this was their last chance. No more could they sit idly by as their cities were destroyed. They had to fight. The vessel, known only as the Phantom, would carry a small crew, including Dr. Reed herself, to the heart of the Black Armada's fleet. Their mission was simple: infiltrate the enemy's ranks, exploit the weakness they had discovered, and, if possible, destroy the Armada from within. It was humanity's last stand. As the Phantom was readied for launch, Dr. Reed stood at the helm, her mind racing with the implications of what they were about to do. The seventh dimension was uncharted territory. No one knew what dangers lurked there, but one thing was certain: if humanity was to survive, it would take every ounce of courage and determination they had left. As the ship's engines roared to life, the world watched. This was it, the moment humanity would either rise to defeat their invaders or fall into the void of oblivion. The Phantom's journey. The air was thick with tension as the Phantom prepared for launch. Dr. Emily Reed stood in front of the massive, newly constructed vessel, her heart racing. This was it, the culmination of years of research, months of sleepless nights, and countless hours of work by the world's brightest minds. The vessel, small in comparison to the enormous Black Armada ships, contained something far more dangerous: humanity's last hope. Behind her, the sounds of technicians and engineers made the atmosphere feel even more surreal. The launch pad was surrounded by soldiers, scientists, and political leaders, people who had watched as their world was decimated by an alien force too powerful to fight. Yet now, they stood in silence, waiting for the impossible to unfold. They had placed all their faith in the hands of this small crew, who would venture into the unknown to strike at the heart of the enemy's empire. Dr. Reed took a deep breath. The mission wasn't just dangerous, it was a suicide run. If they failed to enter the seventh dimension properly, the ship would be lost, and the crew would likely never be found again. There was no turning back once they launched. If they survived, they would have one shot to strike at the Black Armada's core. If they failed, humanity's chances of survival would be all but gone. The countdown had begun. 10, 9, 8. The voice of the commander echoed over the loudspeakers, and each number felt like a hammer strike to Dr. Reed's chest. She wasn't just a scientist now. She was humanity's last hope. Every second felt like an eternity. The weight of her responsibility pressed down on her, but she knew there was no other choice. The crew, a group of experts from across the globe, was preparing inside the ship. They were ready. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could prepare them for what they were about to face. They had no idea what the seventh dimension would be like, or if it would even lead them where they hoped. All they could do was trust the technology they had worked so hard to develop, and pray it was enough. 3, 2, 1. With a deafening roar, the engines ignited, sending the Phantom shooting into the sky. As the ship soared upwards, Dr. Reed's mind raced. The vessel was designed to break through Earth's atmosphere, using the power of the seventh dimension to bypass the Black Armada's sensors and slip undetected into their fleet. But getting there was only part of the challenge. The real test would be surviving the journey and finding the energy conduit that could bring down the Armada's ships. The Phantom passed through the upper atmosphere and into space, and for the first time since the Black Armada's arrival, there was a moment of silence. No explosions, no screaming. The calm was almost disorienting. The vastness of space stretched out before them, endless and cold. But there was no time to marvel at the beauty of the stars. Dr. Reed's focus was fixed on the task at hand, activating the seventh dimension. "Activate the dimensional drive," Dr. Reed ordered, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. The engineer, a young man named Caleb, flipped a series of switches, and the ship trembled as the engines began to hum with a deep, almost primal energy. The fabric of space around them seemed to ripple, and for a brief moment, the universe itself appeared to bend and twist in unnatural ways. The crew watched in awe as the stars stretched and distorted, as if they were traveling through a tunnel of light. But just as quickly as it started, the sensation stopped. The ship was now somewhere else, somewhere beyond the known universe. "We've entered the seventh dimension," Dr. Reed whispered, her voice a mix of awe and fear. They had done it. The impossible was now reality. But that wasn't the end of their journey. They were now in alien territory, a place that existed outside the laws of normal space and time. No one had ever been here before, and no one could predict what dangers lay ahead. From their new vantage point, the crew could see the Black Armada in the distance. Their massive ships were floating in space, perfectly aligned in a way that suggested they were waiting for something. The sheer size of the enemy fleet was almost incomprehensible. There were thousands of ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever seen. The Black Armada was a force unlike any other. But now, they were within striking distance. Dr. Reed's voice broke through the silence. We need to find the core, the heart of their fleet. If we can destroy that, we'll cripple them." The crew nodded, and the ship moved closer. But even as they approached, something felt off. The seventh dimension wasn't just an empty void. It was alive in ways they couldn't understand. Strange, shifting shapes flitted in the edges of their vision, and the ship's sensors flickered as if something was watching them, waiting. "We're not alone," Caleb said, his voice tight with unease. "Something's out there." Before Dr. Reed could respond, a sudden surge of energy blasted through the ship. The lights flickered, and alarms blared as the vessel was tossed violently in all directions. Something was attacking them, but they couldn't see it. The crew scrambled to regain control as the ship veered wildly, barely avoiding destruction. "Stabilize the ship," Dr. Reed shouted. "Get us out of here." The crew fought to maintain control, but it was clear they were no longer alone in the seventh dimension. Whatever entities inhabited this strange realm were aware of their presence, and they didn't seem too happy about it. The Phantom's engines roared as they fought to regain their trajectory, but the mysterious energy continued to slam into them, pushing them further off course. The crew was now in the heart of enemy territory, with no idea what dangers lay ahead. But one thing was clear: if they didn't find a way to fight back, their mission would be over before it even truly began. The final assault. The Phantom had barely survived the last encounter in the seventh dimension. The unknown force attacking them was relentless, shifting through the folds of space in ways the crew couldn't comprehend. Dr. Emily Reed's hands shook as she gripped the control panel, her mind racing. "This is it. We're so close, but can we make it?" She had no answers, only the burning hope that the next few moments would decide humanity's fate. The alien energy strikes had slowed, but they hadn't stopped entirely. They had damaged the Phantom's outer hull, and the ship's systems were strained to their limits. Yet, through sheer determination, the crew had managed to stabilize the vessel just enough to proceed forward. They had to keep going. The Black Armada loomed ahead, with its seemingly invincible fleet just within reach. If they didn't strike now, humanity would be doomed forever. "We can't afford another hit like that," Caleb, the engineer, said through gritted teeth as he worked furiously at his station. "The next blast could tear us apart." Dr. Reed nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. They were out of time. The crew had done everything they could to repair the ship, but they had reached their limit. The Phantom was on borrowed time, and the longer they waited, the more likely they were to be discovered by the Black Armada. If they didn't destroy the core soon, all would be lost. "Prepare the dimensional weapon," Dr. Reed commanded. Her voice was calm, but inside she felt anything but. They had one shot. The seventh dimension had given them an unexpected advantage, but it had also put them in an incredibly perilous position. The vessel was now surrounded by unknown energies, unpredictable phenomena that seemed to respond to their every movement. The crew was in the heart of the enemy's territory, and it was only a matter of time before they were discovered. "Coordinates locked on the enemy flagship," Caleb reported, his fingers flying over the controls. "We'll need to use the dimensional drive to destabilize their core and break through their defenses. Once that happens, the fleet will crumble. We're just one strike away from ending this." Dr. Reed glanced at her crew. They had been through so much together, and now they were on the brink of victory, or annihilation. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "Let's do this, for humanity." With a swift motion, she pressed the button that would activate the weapon. The ship's systems hummed with power as the dimensional energy began to build. For a moment, everything went silent. It was as if the universe held its breath. Then, with a violent jolt, the Phantom shot forward into the heart of the Black Armada. The Black Armada's flagship was a massive, floating fortress, its surface covered with thousands of weapons, defense systems, and shields that could withstand nearly any attack. But the Phantom wasn't going to attack conventionally. The dimensional drive would rip through the fabric of space and strike at the very core of the ship. If successful, it would cause a chain reaction, one that could cripple the entire fleet. The energy from the seventh dimension surged through the ship's core, and suddenly, the surroundings twisted and distorted. The very nature of space seemed to warp around them as the phantom dove straight toward the flagship's center. The crew braced for impact, but as they hurtled forward, they saw something terrifying. Massive alien defense cannons began to target them. "We've been detected," Caleb shouted, his voice strained. "They're locking onto us." Dr. Reed gripped her seat tighter. "Keep going. We can't stop now." The Phantom barreled through a storm of energy blasts, narrowly avoiding the alien defenses. The ship lurched as another strike hit its side, and alarms blared throughout the vessel. The crew could only watch as they neared the core of the flagship. It was their last chance. "Weapon is charging," Caleb said, his hands trembling. "One shot. We either win or we're done for." Dr. Reed's pulse raced as she watched the countdown. The Black Armada was on the verge of tearing them apart, but they had one final weapon, a weapon that could turn the tide of the entire war. "Ready," Caleb said with a deep breath. "Fire," Dr. Reed shouted, her voice barely audible over the sound of the ship's systems groaning under pressure. The Phantom's dimensional weapon released an immense burst of energy. The very fabric of space seemed to tear apart as the weapon pierced the core of the Black Armada's flagship. Time seemed to slow as the energy flowed through the enemy ship's defenses, bypassing them completely. The flagship's outer shell began to crack, its energy conduits destabilizing, and a massive shockwave rippled outwards. The Phantom was thrown violently off course, but the weapon had struck true. The Black Armada's flagship erupted in a burst of blinding light as the dimensional energy overloaded its core. The surrounding ships began to destabilize one by one as the chain reaction spread throughout the fleet. It was happening. The tide was turning. "We did it," Caleb yelled, his voice filled with disbelief. The crew looked out at the destruction that was unfolding before them. The once mighty fleet was crumbling, its ships dissolving into a swirling vortex of energy. The Black Armada had been defeated. Its empire of terror was collapsing in on itself. Dr. Reed stared at the scene before her. The mission was a success. Against all odds, humanity had won. But just as the last remnants of the Black Armada began to fade into nothingness, Dr. Reed knew that the victory came at a high cost. The Phantom had been severely damaged during the battle, and the seventh dimension itself seemed to be collapsing in response to the weapon's power. Their survival was uncertain. "Prepare for emergency jump," Dr. Reed ordered. They had to leave the seventh dimension before they became trapped in its collapse. The crew scrambled to initiate the emergency jump sequence, the Phantom shuddering under the strain. As the ship activated its engines one last time, Dr. Reed took one final look at the destruction they had caused. Earth was safe. The Black Armada was no more. But the journey home was just beginning.